Welcome to this webinar on Australia-Vietnam climate and energy cooperation in the green economy. My name is Robert Law and I'm Director of Advisory and Insights at Asialink. And on behalf of Asialink and our program partners, the Climate Work Centre, I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this session today. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining you from the lands of the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I extend those respects to any Indigenous peoples that may be joining today's webinar. Before I go any further, I should say that we do have simultaneous interpretation available for the webinar. So if you are looking for Vietnamese language feed, you can select it in the Zoom functions. And I should say as well how excited I am to welcome everyone today. We have registrations from people from every state and territory in Australia, and we also have participants registered from Vietnam as well. So really great to have so many people joining this session. Today, we are going to hear from Nguyen from Corio Generation and from Chris Morley, who is the Trade and Investment Commissioner for Austrade in Hanoi. And I will introduce them a bit later on in a little bit more detail. And I will also share a little bit with you about the Australia-Vietnam Green Economy Program that Asialink and ClimateWorks are delivering together. I'd like to begin by setting the scene a little bit in terms of where we are when it comes to Australia-Vietnam climate and energy cooperation. And then we will go to Anna to tell you a little bit more about what Corio is doing with their portfolio in Vietnam. So there really is at the moment, and I think we have some slides that should come up for you. There really is at the moment a real opportunity between Australia and Vietnam when it comes to green economy and climate and energy cooperation. And I think you'll see that there are a number of factors coming together. We do have some slides. I'll just make sure that those are coming up now. And we're seeing a number of factors that are coming together across geopolitical, economic, trade and investment, and bilateral relations as well. So from a geopolitical perspective, what we're seeing is that Vietnam is a very deft country in terms of its diplomacy and its ability to balance competing interests between China, the US, and other partners. And we've seen really strong institutional links between Vietnam and China. But we've also seen an elevation of the relationship between Vietnam and the US as well. Some strong factors there that point to Vietnam's geopolitical stability. On the economic front, Vietnam has been affected, like many countries, by the impacts of the pandemic, and those are still continuing to wash through in an economic sense. So growth was a bit slower than expected this year, but we're certainly expecting to see growth rebound in 2024. There's been some short-term impacts in the real estate market and the bond market, and some political disruptions as well. But we're expecting those factors to wash through and for Vietnam to have a really strong growth profile over coming years and decades. What's really interesting to note about Vietnam is that it has positioned itself as a member of all the key trade and investment agreements in the region. So you'll see a number of acronyms there, RCEP and IPEF and CPTPP. The key thing you need to take away from this is that Vietnam has joined all the big agreements and is therefore able to take advantage of all the tariff cuts and various other provisions of those agreements and really maximize its international engagement. And we're seeing this flow through, particularly on the investment front. where inbound investment into Vietnam is rebounding quite strongly. And we're seeing a lot of interest in the advanced manufacturing space in particular. And indeed, when it comes to clean energy supply chains, we're seeing a lot of interest in Vietnam. And just to give you a sense of where Australia and Vietnam are at, we do have a very strong bilateral relationship, and discussions are underway between both countries about upgrading the relationship to what is called a comprehensive strategic partnership. In the tiers of partnerships that Vietnam has, this is the highest partnership available. So we have a very strong trading relationship, but there is a bit of a lag in terms of investment. So when we look at all these factors together, we see that geopolitical, economic, trade and investment, and the bilateral settings are all really favourable for Australia and Vietnam to pursue cooperation in the green economy. So if we go to the next slide, this next slide just focuses on renewable energy. And I know there are participants joining us from the agriculture sector, and welcome to you. But for this first part of the webinar, we are focused on renewable energy. Vietnam has released its energy generation plans out to 2030 and to 2050. And what we're seeing is that really there is expected to be a huge amount of investment out to 2030. Around $200 billion Australian dollars worth of invested is going to be required to meet what is really surging energy demand in Vietnam. So that's forecast to grow very rapidly over coming years, at least 10 to 12%. And it's really important for Vietnam to secure foreign investment so that it can avoid any disruptions to its domestic power supply and anything that might affect particularly the advanced manufacturing sector that it's looking to build. So that's one really strong driver for the uptake of renewable energy. And the other strong driver is Vietnam's net zero commitments. So with a commitment to reach net zero by 2050. And Vietnam has also made quite a strong 2030 emissions reduction pledge. There's an unconditional pledge of 15.8%. But what is really interesting is the conditional pledge to cut emissions by 43% with international support. And there are a lot of international partners that are putting in place plans right now through a variety of agreements and mechanisms to support Vietnam reach that higher emissions reduction target. So the environment is right. The settings are favourable. We do see commitment from the Vietnam government, and we are seeing movement. So it's really an opportune time for us to look a little closer at what role businesses can play in Vietnam's energy transition and in creating a green economy for Vietnam. So I'd now like to turn to Anna Nguyen from Corio Generation. Anna is very experienced in the renewable energy space, and particularly when it comes to structured financing. She's held a number of corporate roles across renewable energy companies, and she has been with Corio Generation for over 3 years now. So she's going to share a little bit with us about Corio's international presence and its portfolio of interests in Vietnam. Anna, a warm welcome to you, and over to you to tell us a little more.
Yes, thank you, Robert. I'm Anna Nguyen from Corio Generation Vietnam. I'm in charge of offshore wind development in Vietnam. I would like to share some brief information about Corio and what we do in Vietnam. You can see my screen.
Yes, can we just get you to go full screen there, please, Anna?
Yeah.
That's perfect, thank you.
Yes. So first of all, Corio is a offshore wind developer, global offshore wind developer, and we are under Macquarie Asset Management. We are very determined to have the country to transform their economies with clean, green, and reliable offshore wind power. Currently, we have one of the largest offshore wind pipeline globally, which is 30 gigawatts, and we also have like 300 staff in 31 markets. Here, our office based in London, and we have also other office in Edinburgh, Madrid, and in US, in Asia. We are also very active, and we have office in Singapore, Taipei, Seoul, Manila, Hanoi, and of course in Australia. About the history of Corio. So Corio, we were launched in 2022, but however, we have a long history from the Green Investment Bank, were established by the UK government in 2012. And after 2017, Macquarie Group take over the Green Investment Bank, and we turn it to Green Investment Group. At this time, Macquarie already contribute, for the offshore wind development in UK. We participate in more than 4 gigawatts of offshore wind in UK market. And in 2024, Corio, when our portfolio grow, and Corio, Macquarie decided to launch Corio Generation to specialize in offshore wind development. And after 1 year, our portfolio have grown like double time, and also the number of staff also grow double. Corio was named as an offshore wind developer of the year at the Wind Investment Award. So this is our track record in the past. Currently, Corio have we develop offshore wind in both in Europe market, US, Asia, and America. So here you can see that our most advanced projects are in UK with 3.5 gigawatts, in Ireland, in US we also have a project advanced. We are one of the first advanced floating offshore wind project. In Taiwan, Corio also from the Macquarie time, we already developed Formosa 1, Formosa 2, and recently we were awarded for Formosa 3. So we are also quite established in Taiwan. Besides that, we also have a project early stage development in other market in Europe, like in Norway, Sweden, France, and in Asia, like Vietnam, Philippines, Australia, and in Brazil. We also explore other market like Spain, Portugal, and India. Vietnam. So I would like to highlight about the Vietnam. As you are aware that the PDPA was approved in 2023 with the ambitious target of the government of Vietnam to develop renewable, in which 6 gigawatts, is target to develop by 2030, and it's even bigger ambition to develop between 30 gigawatt, 70 to 90 gigawatt by 2050. Seeing the potential of Vietnam, Corio or Macquarie already came to Vietnam since 2019. We applied our first site survey for a project in northern Bình Thuận, which is the best area in Vietnam to develop offshore wind. And if the project will be approved, it will develop around 3 gigawatts of offshore wind in Bình Thuận. Besides that, we also explore and apply for other offshore wind projects in the north of Vietnam, namely Hải Phòng, because the north of Vietnam is also have like huge potential for renewable demand. We also have another project with the local partner in Vũng Tàu. And currently, we are also one of the most IT developer, offshore wind developer in Vietnam. We also engage with the government of Vietnam, contributes our expertise, and we really expect that we can contribute for the development of offshore wind sector in Vietnam. So this is our brief introduction about our business globally and in Vietnam. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for that overview, Anna. And it's really interesting to see that Macquarie through Corio has identified Vietnam as a priority country in Southeast Asia. And that has a lot to do with, I think, both the policy settings, but also the natural environment as well. We will come back to you for some questions, and we will also come to Chris Morley in a minute to share. But firstly, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the Australia-Vietnam Green Economy program that we are delivering in partnership with ClimateWorks and with support from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Under the program, we've now released 3 briefing papers. So if you're interested to get a better understanding of the opportunities when it comes to green economy cooperation between Australia and Vietnam, these are your starting points. The focus is quite strongly on renewable energy, mitigation, skills, technology, and also supply chains. So the first paper you see there is really a scene setter, and it's all about sort of laying out the context for in which green economy cooperation occurs. The second paper is a deep dive into the energy generation sector and what's required to decarbonise that, and also what the opportunities might be for Australian businesses. The third paper, very interesting, authored by our colleagues at ClimateWorks, that goes into detail about the opportunities for Vietnam to be a major clean energy technology supplier. And, you know, given the scale of the challenge that Australia faces in renewable energy, you know, Vietnam is a very prospective partner in that area. We have more papers coming as well on sustainable finance, and another paper on skills and innovation cooperation between the 2 countries. So those 2 papers will be out next year. To continue on, we're also excited for the first time to give you a sneak peek of the upcoming Australia-Vietnam Green Economy Summit. So this summit will be held in Ho Chi Minh City on the 15th and 16th of April. And the aim is really to bring together Australian and Vietnamese business leaders and policymakers to really explore those opportunities to grow the Australia-Vietnam green economy. So we will put a link in the chat if you would like to find out more and express interest in that. We will be announcing our speakers for that summit soon, so stay tuned to hear more about who will be speaking there. And one more thing to keep an eye out for is the Vietnam Green Economy Academy. So this is a real opportunity for any Australian businesses that want to turbocharge their engagement with Vietnam in the green economy space, to really build their knowledge, and not just their knowledge, but their capabilities and their skills, and do that through a series of modules that we will deliver, with the end result being development of a really actionable plan to help your business explore opportunities in Vietnam's green economy. So we will be running that academy over 4 weeks in March. So I would encourage you as well, if you're interested to find out more, to click the link that's in the chat. That just gives you a sense of the broad range of opportunities and activities that are happening under this program. Because there is a lot in the space, and we want to make sure that businesses and universities and other organisations are really equipped when it comes to engaging with their Vietnamese counterparts. I'd now like to bring Chris into the conversation. Chris Morley is the Trade and Investment Commissioner in Hanoi. He has a lot of global experience, including in the US, in China, and has been in Vietnam now for, I believe, over almost 18 months. And Chris works across a real range of sectors, including agribusiness, food and beverage, advanced manufacturing, and more. So, Chris, over to you. We'd love to hear some views from the ground on what opportunities you're seeing in the market.
Thanks, Robert, and thanks, Anna, for your presentation as well. And good morning or good afternoon and possibly good evening to participants. It's great to see your interest in Vietnam. I can't think of another country I'd rather be in right now. I think Vietnam is the hottest country in the world in terms of people's interests from a business and commercial point of view, and for good reason as well. As Robert mentioned, I'm with Austrade, so we are the Australian Federal Government's trade promotion and facilitation agency, and really what we're here to do is to help Australian businesses with insights, information, and introduction into the market. And we have a team here in Hanoi, but also in Ho Chi Minh City that are ready and willing to help you with your market entry and promotion of your business within Vietnam. I think if I can just follow on from Robert and Anna and some of the points they made about Vietnam, it'd be good just to highlight a few points that we see here on the ground. Vietnam, as I said, is the market of choice or destination for a range of sectors, and really it's 100 million people that live up here. It's a younger demographic. It's a demographic where we're seeing an emerging middle class. That middle class has a real aspiration to take advantage of a lot of Western products, and part of that comes through from the increased investment that Rob alluded to earlier. And that investment is across a range of different sectors. So we see the likes of Intel, Apple, Google, my favorite toy, Lego, opening up factories up here, Pandora Jewelry. All these investments create jobs, and those jobs create increased disposable income. And we know with increased disposable income, many people will spend that on better quality food, better quality education, better quality healthcare. So the things that will continue to strengthen the Australia-Vietnam trade relations for the next 50 years in this year where we celebrate our 50th year of diplomatic relations. But importantly, with that investment that comes into Vietnam is the backing of the Vietnam government to support and really invest in the power grid and the need to move to renewables. And I think it's hard to see another country that has that commitment in the same level that Vietnam does. And while Corio is a great Australian company and doing some amazing things up here, and we continue to congratulate Corio and Anna and the team, there are other countries as well that are also looking at putting in offshore wind facilities and solar as well. And these investments from other countries and other companies also create other jobs for Australia's great capacity in services, in consulting, in engineering, and other labour that we can provide to support that development within the transition that Vietnam government is committed to in terms of the power needs as well, to support that critical investment that is happening in Vietnam, because the data centers that Intel, Google, and Apple and others will build here need reliable, consistent power, and that's really where this work around the green economy is really going to come into its own. I think if we look at some of the sector examples, infrastructure, there's a lot of work going on in ports and trades and airports, and again, the sustainability and the green economy that is needed to support that infrastructure. We look at the resources. Vietnam has an amazing number of their own natural resources as well up in the north, particularly in critical minerals that can go into battery manufacture. And Vietnam has an opportunity to potentially be a semiconductor or a chip manufacturing country as well. We're seeing some of that investment from Korea and Japan automakers. Kia and Hyundai as an example, have processing facilities where the batteries are manufactured here in Vietnam and then exported up to Korea and then re-exported in some of the automobiles that leave that country. And importantly, the Australian lithium and Australian critical minerals play a key role and can continue to play a key role in that supply chain and that value chain that Vietnam can be part of as we look to add renewable cars and renewable energy into the market as well. I think the other thing I just want to touch on before going back to Rob, and really I think the best thing from these presentations is to hear the questions from you as business and as people interested in Vietnam. But we recently, there was released the ASEAN 2040 economic strategy by Mr. Nicholas Moore, former Macquarie banker, who outlined through 70 recommendations for the whole region, not just Vietnam, the whole Southeast Asian region, how Australian business can better interact. And we'll see up in March in Melbourne, there'll be the ASEAN Special Summit, and that will see the leaders of all ASEAN countries meet with our Prime Minister Albanese there to discuss better interaction. And a lot of those recommendations by Nicholas Moore link directly to green economy, not just in Vietnam, but also the broader region. And I think that's a really important strategy. One key part of that important ASEAN economic strategy as well is what we're calling deal teams. And deal teams looks at almost the reverse of Austrade, where we are looking at trade and investment going into Australia. We're now actively looking at how do we promote investment into other markets in the region to better build better business relationships up here in the region. And just two other announcements that are worth sort of covering off as well. Our Prime Minister Albanese was up here in June. I had the fortunate ability to take a selfie with the PM, but the other news that he did up here was the announcement of a decarbonisation announcement of $105 million to support the climate change and energy transition that is going on up here. It's a real event, and Australia is playing a key role in that. And also we had our Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, who's actually been to Vietnam twice. And I think I'm right in this, and Vietnam is the only country that Penny Wong, our Foreign Minister, has been to twice in her term as Foreign Minister, which signifies the importance of the Vietnam-Australia relationship. And Penny Wong committed a $94.5 million climate change support package for the Mekong Delta, which is a really crucial part of geography of Vietnam, a real economic powerhouse for so many regions, not just agribusiness. And for Australia to continue to support the Mekong Delta in that way is a really significant part of our relationship going forward over the next 10 years. So in closing, before passing back to Robert, I'll probably say my advice if you're interested in Vietnam is shop early and avoid the rush. Come up now in 2023, 2024, because if you're waiting until 2026 or 2027, you're missing the boat, you're missing the opportunity. This is the country on the rise now. The economic growth up here is around 4.5% GDP. Government here was hoping for 6%. Obviously, they won't get that, but compared to a lot of Western countries, 4.5% is significantly better. And over the next few years, with the increased education, increased job opportunities, we're going to see Vietnam grow at 8% GDP year on year for the next sort of 10 years. So shop early, avoid the rush, come up to Vietnam, let us show you around, and come to one of the best countries in the world. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Chris. I have several questions for Chris and Anna, but can I invite participants to please put any questions that they have in the Q&A box, either in English or in Vietnamese, and we will try and answer those questions. But I have, and we've received some questions in advance as well from participants, so thank you. I have a few things that I want to cover off. I want to ask about finance. I want to ask about agriculture, because I know we've got people on the webinar from the agriculture sector. And I want to ask about some practical tips about doing business as well. So maybe, Anna, can we start with you? Financing is obviously so important for these deals, and particularly for any major investment in renewable energy or anything around advanced manufacturing. What trends around financing are you seeing at the moment in Vietnam?
Yes, Robert. Okay. Relating to your question, as you know, like your previous slide also show that Vietnam also need a 200 billion investment in power in coming years, right? In the next 10 years. So therefore, that is a huge amount that the Vietnam will need to mobilize, not only domestically, but also international financing. About power financing, like the first thing we talk about power purchase agreement. So offshore wind, I will talk particular about the offshore wind. Offshore wind is quite a new industry in Vietnam, and you might aware that the regulation is not yet there. Yes, so therefore we cannot avoid that certain risks we have for the investment in offshore wind in Vietnam. But we believe that the Vietnamese government will like work and ready to discuss with the developer to harmonize the risk for the investment. For the financing of offshore wind for Corio in particular, we have been explore multiple solutions and like try to work out the best structure for the Vietnam. We have been discussed with several green finance institutions globally and also regionally to see what is the risk they can cover or what is the risk that investor can take. Therefore, to have a customized structure finance in Vietnam. And in my opinion, for the very first few offshore wind projects in Vietnam, a solution of blended financing would be the most suitable, which means that it will come from both public financing and private financing joined together to design a suitable structure to optimize the financing costs as well as mitigate some risks for the private investment, so as well as support for the government of Vietnam forward to offshore wind development with a larger scale at a later stage. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I had a little bit of just disruption to the Zoom just at the end there. But I think you made two really great points. The first is that not everything's in place at the moment, but you're really confident in the market and you're in the early stage, but you're committed to the market and you're committed to working through things with the Vietnamese government and with the regulators. So I think that's a very strong vote of confidence in Vietnam's trajectory that Corio has made that commitment. And then I really appreciated the second point you made about the whole range of financing options that are out there, whether it's public institutions, private, various sort of international green financing initiatives and blended finance as well. We know that Vietnam is one of the few countries to have signed on to the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which is a very large initiative that makes significant amounts of financing available. So that's obviously another source of public funds available as well for those who are looking at financing options in the market. So certainly some interesting developments there. Thank you for that. And I want to acknowledge that we've got a few questions coming in, so we will try to get through them. We have a question around cost of freight. We will come to that in a minute, and something around water management as well. So, Chris, I might start off with you. Just, I do know we have people on who are in the agriculture space in particular. What are you seeing in terms of opportunities for agricultural technologies, climate smart agriculture, and so on?
Sure. Good question, because Vietnam is, as many participants be aware, is an agricultural powerhouse in their own right. A number of exports around prawns and even lychees and other products. Pepper, as an example, is exported from Vietnam to Australia in significant quantities, and you only need to be in Vietnam to know the coffee here is amazing. So The difference I think we find with Vietnam's farming is it's generally a lot smaller plots, and generally it's a lot more community sort of based rather than larger farming allotments. So some of the farming technology that Australia has in terms of servicing significant areas doesn't necessarily apply. But that said, there's a lot of technology that Australia has in terms of smart water use, in terms of reducing pesticides, in terms of looking at different sustainability options to better protect the land and still produce a high yield and a premium product. They're what we're seeing of interest going into Vietnam. The other important thing, Vietnam is an aquaculture powerhouse. I mentioned prawns being exported from Vietnam to Australia. So there's a lot of technology in terms of sea farming and aqua farming that Australia is working with in Vietnam. And a lot of it also comes through from the universities here in Vietnam that are established to help support those industries as well. So as an example, Nha Trang University, where many participants may have been on a holiday because it's beautiful and gold sands and blue water. The Nha Trang University, they're partners with a number of Australian providers and industry to also feed in those insights and the technology used into the Vietnam aquaculture sector as well. And just probably a comment on water generally. I mean, water is used in everything. And it's a really important commodity that whether you're manufacturing a microchip or processing red meat or whatever it might be, there's need for efficient water usage. And we've seen in the past, probably 5 or 6 years, the Australian Water Association actively bring delegations up into the market. And that's a broad ranging association that will look at things from, water pumps or how to reuse water, sustainable use of water, for industrial and residential applications. So Australia plays a crucial role, will continue to play a crucial role, and it's really led by the Australian Water Association coming up into market for that particular sector as well. So I hope that answers the question, Rob.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for picking up on water. It sounds like there is some good cooperation happening there, and it sounds like the Australian Water Association is the organisation to be connected with. I wanted to pick up on this other question for you around cost of freight. What are you hearing in terms of shipping both to Vietnam, but then also, manufactured goods and other products out of Vietnam?
Yeah. So last year was probably a high year of logistics costs. I think after the COVID pandemic and the sort of organisation of the logistics, it took some time, and last year was probably the highest, or if not the second highest value of cost of freight. We've seen it this year reduce quite significantly, certainly not back to pre-pandemic levels in what we hear from business. The shipping lines between Vietnam and Australia are generally pretty reliable. We see significant trade in commodities, whether it be iron ore, coal, wheat, coming up quite regularly, cotton as well. Cotton is now a $2 billion industry up into Vietnam. Seafood and more premium products are going by air freight. And we know we're very excited that there'll be more flights between Vietnam and Australia coming on. Previously, there was a cap on flights at 42 flights per week between Australia and Vietnam. And we know that our two governments are working closely together. That should lift to 51 per week, and then again increase, and hopefully over the next few months jump up to a double figure of around 82 flights between Vietnam and Australia. And all that means is increased capacity, increased competition, and we should see reduced cargo costs as well between the two countries. I think the important point you alluded to as well, Rob, is that Vietnam is a manufacturing country. So a lot of what they're producing here is exported as well. And so Vietnam is a good transit country. We do see a number of trade and transport route servicing. But this year, with higher cost of living, higher interest rates, we have seen the manufacturer managers index that looks at how many orders and forecast orders happen for processed goods and high-end electronics and things like that, manufactured goods, has been down somewhat quite consistently all year, which means the need for Vietnam to export has also been down, which has also added to some higher increased pressures on those transport and logistics costs. But generally, it's a more positive story than it was in 2022.
Great, thank you. Please do keep those questions coming through the Q&A function. We'll be very happy to put your questions to the panelists. Anna and Chris, I want to ask you perhaps if you can give some tips, to businesses that might be thinking about exploring, opportunities in Vietnam. What sort of challenges do they need to overcome? Anna, can we start with you, please? What advice or would you give to any Australian businesses thinking about Vietnam? So we've just got you on mute there.
Yes. Back. So relating to challenges, I think all the market have its own challenge. And in Vietnam, even though, I think maybe regulation is one of the first challenge, because like for our investment is offshore wind is quite new in Vietnam. But in the other market, there are also different other challenges. But we, when we develop offshore in Vietnam, besides the challenge, we also see the solution. And one of the things in Vietnam is like we can, the government of Vietnam is like I communicate well with the business and listening. So therefore, we believe that every challenge will have a solution. For Corio, we also, willing and continue to discuss with different agents in Vietnam and even with a local company in Vietnam to go through all the solutions. And we hope to will be one of the pioneer offshore wind developer in Vietnam. Yes.
That's great. And I think it's, it's a good reminder that, yes, there is regulatory complexity in Vietnam, but, there's complexity in every market when it comes to regulation. And, in particular in the climate and energy and sustainability space, we see that. So I think for businesses and organizations, there's, a lot of homework they need to do. They can engage really good Vietnamese advisors as well and make sure they're drawing on the best advice. So that seems like a challenge, but something that ultimately can be overcome. Chris, I'm interested to go to you. Any advice for Australian businesses? And I might make it a two-part question because we do have Vietnamese participants on the webinar. So any advice for Vietnamese countries thinking about investing in Australia?
Well, my advice is to both sides, Australia and Vietnam, do it. The opportunities are definitely there, and yes, there are some challenges. But picking up some of Anna's point and your point too, Rob, I'd encourage all Australian businesses and Vietnam businesses. There's an organisation called Viettrade that Austrade has a relationship with, and essentially they're the Vietnamese version of us. A trade promotion facilitation agency. So they exist to support Vietnamese businesses going into Australia, but going forward through the ASEAN 2040 strategy, you will see us as an Australian government be more active at promoting Vietnam investment opportunities in Vietnam for Australian businesses to also be involved in, and not just Vietnamese businesses investing into Australia. I think one point I'd make is come and talk to Austrade. If we're not your first call, we should be your second call. We have a great team in market that can that have connections, they have the knowledge, they have the network that can really support your market entry and can help you avoid some of those pitfalls. The badge of government carries significant weight up here. This is a central socialist government up here in Vietnam, and it's important to look at what if your first meeting is able to be supported by Austrade or a representative of the Australian government, it can go a long way to opening up the doors. And even if there's no sort of commercial discussion, at least you're going there with that badge of government and that support. The other important thing about Vietnam is, unlike the US where I've been based before, Vietnam is very much a relationship-driven market as opposed to a transactional focused market. You may well find that your commitment to market needs to be 3 or 4 visits and 3 or 4 meetings with your partners or future partners before you're getting to that detail. You need to understand where their kids are studying, what they want to study, where their favorite holiday destination is, and then you can talk business, and then you'll get the deals, and then you'll be able to progress and start on a future commercial, a bright path in that. And also, I'd encourage you, Australian businesses, to invite your Vietnamese partners down to Australia. Too often, I think we forget what an amazing country Australia has, and sometimes we talk about it a lot. But to invite your Vietnamese partners down and showcase your facilities, your manufacturing, your processing, whatever it might be, it's a great way of also building trust and building faith as well. So I think extending that invitation for Vietnamese to come to Australia to see you in person is something also that I would encourage you to look at doing as well.
Great, thank you, Chris. And I do have a question here for you, which we'll see if you can tackle it. If not, you can take it on notice. It's around sustainability principles applied to export of seafoods. Would you like to have a go at that, or would you like to take that one on notice and we can follow up with the person who asked?
Well, so what's the sustainability on seafood exports?
It's about credentialing, and I guess, is there sort of a credentialing or sustainability scheme around exporting of seafoods and shrimp and prawns in particular?
From Australia or from Vietnam, or?
Yeah, I think so, from Australia.
Sure. So there's a Seafood Industry Association of Australia, and there are other industry bodies. There are different levels of credibility and accreditation that different businesses can look to achieve in terms of reaching sustainability. I think it's not something that we as Austrade are sort of mandating or putting in place or regulate at all, but certainly I think Vietnam's no different to a lot of other consumer societies where they are worried about the sustainable impact of the food that they're eating. They are worried about some of the packaging and the transport, and to provide that consumer or the business with a sense of trust that the product that they're buying is grown and produced in sustainable processes. That can go a long way to helping secure that premium price that we want the Australian product to be seen at as well. So I probably haven't answered that question very well. It's not my field of expertise. Whilst I love lobster and prawn and all things Australian seafood, I would encourage them to talk to Seafood Industry Association and the other industry bodies, and potentially the Department of Agriculture, Forest and Fisheries, who can also give more support on that, on those accreditations.
Thanks for that, Chris. I'll go to last questions now. I'd be interested, as you give some final thoughts, maybe if you could just talk a little bit about the importance of local partnerships. I know one of your projects is a partnership with a local Vietnamese company. So perhaps could you talk a little bit about how to go about forming a partnership and what's really important when you think about a local partner?
So in Corio, we are quite care about localize. As you see in every country, Corio also use like local staff, like myself as a Vietnamese, for the development of the project, because each country have its own culture and the way to do business, and Corio really respect that. So beside of local staff, we also care about local partner, because like there are many things to do in Vietnam, regulation, contribution for regulation, how to understand like which is the best way for Vietnam to develop offshore wind, for example, and how to communicate with the government of Vietnam. So in order to like most effectively doing this in Vietnam, we also use some local consultant company, and we also work with local company to develop the project, because they will be the the bridge between global company like Corio and with the Vietnamese cultural and business environment. So for us, we have been here since 2019, and we also, one of our important work is dedicated to find the right local partner. And I think Vietnamese company, they are quite, ambitious and to learn, to grow, to develop, and also sharing their knowledge. So it's not so difficult to find local partner, but the one that have the chemistries or the same, operation manual with your company is important. So that it also take time. And at Corio, we have been doing that for last 3 years, and for the moment, we are happy with the structure we have. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you. And I think really great advice there about the importance of local staff, the importance of finding that local partner. So thank you very much. Chris, final advice or observation from you?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And probably just pick up on some of the points Anna made, because I think they're really crucial. And I think, Corio is a great example of, Australia-Vietnam business relations and the success that it can have. And this is in a very new emerging sector, renewable energies and climate change. And, in a developing country like Vietnam, Anna was right earlier, where sometimes the policy and the regulation hasn't quite kept pace with the government priority and initiative. So there are a range of challenges that you will face in terms of, that market entry, and particularly with something around climate change and renewable energy. But again, Corio is a great example of the commitment that is required over a number of years and the success that can come from that commitment. And it's not just in renewable energy. RMIT has been established up in, Vietnam for over 20 years, a leading provider of Australian education. We see a lot more interest in health, services being provided to Vietnam. Into CBH, one of our biggest grain producers from Western Australia, has a partnership with Intervolt here in Ho Chi Minh City. There are a number of great Australia-Vietnam business relationships where they have worked together to overcome those challenges and are achieving some terrific, financial success and commercial success, and really investing in, this great country that is Vietnam. So, probably just credit to Anna and her team at Corio and others in the business community that continue to apply that dedication. And I hope more of the participants today are able to follow that lead and come up to market and keep coming up to market. That's what we want to see from Australian business, is that commitment. And I know from Vietnamese business going to Australia, we'd love to support that more as well. But yeah, thanks, Rob.
Great, thank you, Chris. And can I extend my appreciation to both of you for joining us today? It's been incredible to hear the insights that you have shared with us. As we close out this session, can I please ask you to take a moment to scan the QR code that you see on the screen, and please provide us with feedback so that we can make these even better in the future. And with that, we come to the end of our session around Australia-Vietnam green economy cooperation. So on behalf of Asialink and our program partner ClimateWorks, thank you very much for attending, and please keep an eye out for future activities under this program. Have a great day. Thank you, everybody.